Alrighty, welcome to another episode of the One Last Cast podcast. My name is Jonathan, and as always, we have Merriel Solesky with us. How's it going, Merriel?
How's it going, bud?
Well, we have an exciting show today. We have Michael Okruhlik, creator of the Knockin Tail Lures, with us. He's backstage right now and waiting for us. Um, and we wanted to talk about his Knockin Tail Lures series, as well as the process and art of making soft plastics. For those of you who are interested in it, we've had some questions about it in the past. I know nothing about soft plastic making. Merrill, I don't know if you know anything about it, but I think it's a very exciting process. And towards the middle of the show, we will also be one of the first people to reveal some new products coming up with the Knockin Tail Lures. So I think that's very exciting. But before we get started, as always, let's kind of give a shout out to our sponsors. Of course, Knockin Tail Lures. I think it's one of the better soft plastics on the coast, Texas coast. I use it all the time. Merrill, I know you use it as well. Currently, if you want to get a deal on them, if you use our code OLCP 2022, and you can get 20% off your Knockin Tail Lure order. Also, we have 4A printing. Aaron does awesome things with his towels, custom towels he makes for us, as well as some other products such as some buffs and shirts. If you have anything custom that you want to be made, just reach out to him, and I'm sure he'll get you taken care of as well. And of course, if you're looking for a kayaking fishing page, kind of a great place to be, check out Dirty South Kayak Anglers DSKA on Facebook. That group is an amazing group. A lot of helpful people on there, and a lot of knowledge should be gained from there as well. So before we get started with Michael, Merrill, I know that you recently went on a pretty exciting, seems like a really exciting wade trip,
Yes.
and I think you wanted to talk about that. So come on, tell us what wading is all about, because it seems like you never get out of your kayak.
Yeah. Yeah. Wading's more of your field, your technique that you like to do. But I thought I'd go out and give it a shot. I've been trying to fish with this guy for probably 3 years, but he always gets booked up around that season.
Mhm.
So, but you asked the question if I know anything about making plastic lures, and I didn't answer that. So I watched a YouTube video. So I'm kind of an expert at it. So that's the answer to your question. No, just kidding. I never made a plastic lure. But yeah, so our trip started off. I finally booked. I had to book him like I think in November just to fish with him
Mhm.
in February. I mean, that's how fast he gets booked up. So
And what's the captain's name?
Captain Chad Peterick.
Yeah, so
Uh,
very well known guide on the Texas coast. So
yeah,
uh,
and yeah, he's pretty well known down here. He's big on trout conservation, and he actually throws a big trout tournament. He's doing something new with these guys. It's never been done. So y'all tune in to that. I think it's called Legends, Saltwater Legends. So y'all
okay,
check that out. He's doing some new stuff and to keep the trout in the water and keep them alive. And instead of bringing big dead trout to the weigh-ins, trying to keep them alive, they're pretty tough to do that.
yeah. I
But
think it's like a kind of like a CPR format. It looks like.
right, right, and you have a
Yeah.
scale with you, and
Hmm.
you weigh the scale, and you have a scale, and you do a video, so keeps everything legit.
Awesome, awesome.
But yeah, so we made it out. One of the guys backed out on me last moment. He had some stuff to do, so I tried to scramble to get a third person in there. Um, so it just ended up being me and Nick. The whole reason I booked him wasn't to solely catch big trout. It was to learn stuff from the guy because he's known for catching big trout and catching trout in general. And that whole area I fished probably down south. I probably fished maybe 10, 15 times with different people. And I kind of wanted to see what he does. And the whole point was to learn something from him. So we get out to our spot, we jump out, got all my Sims gear, weight gear on. So I was ready. The cold weather, I think it was probably the water temp was somewhere around the 30, 40 degree temperature range. And it was pretty cold out there. Me and Nick actually fished the night before, so we got like 1 hour of sleep. So maybe 1 or 2 hours of sleep. That's what we got. But so we made it out to the spot. We get out and put on a fat boy right off, and then stuck a trout. Then I stuck stuck that one that was close. Wasn't quite 30, but
Right,
it's about
okay,
a hit.
you gotta explain it a little more because, that trout you caught was a beauty,
Yes,
um,
like I said,
and
it's not the trout you catch, it's the angle you catch the trout. Yeah, but yeah, so yeah, so that one, it was that one is we caught it, and then it's like, if you open the mouth and pinch the tail, it'll be over 30. But I was like, no man, it's not quite 30, man. I've been hugging that 30 mark for several years now. I busted a 32 about maybe 6-7 years back, and haven't haven't caught another 30 since. And I think my object, like now, I'm just like, if I catch one, great. But I just, to me, anything over 6.5, 7 pounds, I think is a big trout, and that's my definition of a big trout. Anything in that big range is, I mean, even a 4 or 5 pounder, I think is a really nice trout. And just so happens, after I busted that one, uh, Nick just was on fire, man. He just started lighting them up, and so before we even got on the water, Chad explained to us exactly what we're gonna do before we do it. So he was more attuned to what was going on in the water, uh, and our game plan before we even fished. He told us, "This is what we're gonna do. This is how we're gonna do it." And we just stuck to him. We listened to him, and we were all successful. Our average trout was around 3 to 5 pounds, and it was just one of those days where it's just a whole bunch of decent trout. And to me, I call them solid trout, man. It was a whole bunch of solid trout, and to be averaging solid trout, I mean, it was unreal. We just stuck to listening to him and did exactly what he told us, and we went to another spot, and I tried on a different jig head, and I'm blaming it on that. I started missing some here and there. So I was like, man, screw this jig head. I took this jig head off, and my buddy likes to use this weedless one. And I took that one off, and I put back on what was working, and started sticking them
yeah,
again. And
don't change what's not broken.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, anyways, I don't know. We were already having a good time. So it was like, let's just try something, new and stuff. So, but yeah, man, it was a really good trip, man. We caught fish since we jumped off the boat all the way till we loaded up. I think I ended it with a 3 pounder, 3 and some change pounder, and he said, man, that's a good way to end it, and we booked it back. So it was a damn good day. We changed spots because the wind was changing. And for those that don't know, the Lower Laguna Madre, one of the things I learned is solely based on wind. Like, and that's one of the things that I learned is everything is wind driven, and knowing how the wind reacts with what the structure is underneath the water is the most important stuff, in that area. So, what you learn in Galveston Bay probably is not going to work in Matagorda Bay, Lower Laguna Madre. I don't know why I said Matagorda, the Lower Laguna. So, we did really good, man. And we just listened to the guide, and he knew exactly what was going to happen before it happened.
Yeah.
And it's a damn good time.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't fish along the Texas coast, the Lower Laguna, what he's talking about with the wind is that, and I actually learned this a lot from we were talking to Michael earlier in our pre-production meeting. That apparently there's not as much tidal movement as compared to everywhere else that like Galveston. So whenever these trout, they a lot of them are very tidal oriented. So with no tide movement, you kind of have to depend on the wind to help move the water around a little bit. So I found that very interesting. And it sounds like you learned a lot. Are you going to be doing more wading in the future, Merrill?
No, I'm gonna stick to kayak. No, I'm just kidding. No, it was fun. I had fun waiting. I mean, I got the wade gear. Why not? And so yeah, I might do it a handful of times. Maybe you can get me out there on the West Bay Flat, and we can hammer it down.
Yeah.
I know
Well,
last time we were in West Bay, that's where I typically wade at, down at
yeah.
the shoreline.
Perfect. All right. So awesome stuff. So yeah, without further ado, let's bring Michael aboard. So if for those of you who don't know Michael, Michael is the creator of My Coast Outdoors. He's created creator of the Knockin Tail Lures as well as the Controlled Descent. Um, And I think both of these lures are very, very unique and very good lures. Especially controlled descent. They're very specialized in what they can do. But I think it's something that everybody should have in their box, as well as a Knockin Tail. So let's introduce Michael. How's it going,
Hey guys.
Michael?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So thanks for coming onto our show. I know you've been on the market for the last few years, for more than a few years, but the last couple of years seems like it's really taken off. And I just first of all, thank you for being on the show. Just to kind of get a rapid fire start, kind of give us a story behind My Coast Outdoors. How did it come about? Your history.
So we launched in May of 2016, and I started working on the controlled descent lures probably 2 years before that. It was a long, drawn-out process. It took me a while to get it going. But before I designed the controlled descent lures, I actually had the rattling tail in mind first. So that was the first lure I did. I don't know when it was. It was probably a couple years before that. The first lure I made, I didn't have a lot of the technology and the tools that I later gained. My dad made a mold for me. It was very generic. It was a big lure, had a rattle in the tail, and it was a total dud. It spun like a corkscrew, and it was a disaster. I says, okay, that's enough lure making for me. Let me go back to Bass Assassin or whatever I was throwing at the time. And then I had, I've always been the kind of person that would say, I wish somebody made this. I wish somebody made this. And there was a point, 15, 20 years ago, I don't know when it was, where I just started writing all these things down. Every time that came up, I'd write it down and I'd go and I'd work on them. It was something that would make my life easier. And I would make those things, and I had visions of, maybe producing them someday or something, but I never did, other than the lures. And back when I started with the controlled descent, I was fishing corkies a lot. I really like that lure. It's a great lure, obviously, for big trout. I fish West Galveston Bay a lot. And those of you that fish it, there's a lot of shell. It's a big clumpy shell. Loves to eat corkies. And although they were like $3 back then, it wasn't that big of a deal, but they were still expensive. And I didn't want to lose them. But worse than that is I didn't want to bust the area, right? So you get hung on the shell and you're in a big trout area and you got to yank it off or, whatever happens, or walk out there and get it. I mean, you just kind of blew the day. If you're fishing for big trout. And the same goes for baffin. I fished baffin a lot back then. So you had the rocks or the grass, whatever it was. So I wanted a slow sinking lure that was weedless. And that's where I came up with the controlled descent idea. So it could still be slow sinking. It was weedless. I could fish it around all of those areas. I've never lost one to a snag to this day, knock on wood.
Oh, wow.
Because, they're very weedless, and the way they're designed, when you put the weedless hook in there, it just doesn't get caught. And that's kind of what drove the need for that. Was there wasn't a product on the market that wasn't loaded with treble hooks. So that's why I came up with it. And the same thing with the Knockin Tail. There was nothing out there. So I revisited that idea again and came up with that one. So I just wanted to make something for me first to get me what I wanted. And then it turned out it worked well. So I decided, okay, let me see about making this for production.
So what was it like to be like, man, I'm trying to accomplish something with this lure, and how much trouble did it take to get it where you needed to be, and how did it feel to accomplish that goal, to be like, I got it,
So it was good. I had talked about the idea for a while, and a friend of mine was like, just quit talking about it and just do it already. I guess they got tired of me. So I was like, well, I don't have this and I don't have that. So we kind of talked about it and brainstormed and found me some resources to get it started. When I started this, I was, starting my family. I had young kids. We just bought a house. I wasn't going to invest a lot of money into it. So fortunately, my dad was a machinist. So I had that access, and his best friend was a machinist and a programmer. So I had that at my disposal, which I wouldn't be in this business if it wasn't for that, because I was, a good production mold is, $8,000 to $12,000, and I wasn't going to sink that into a maybe, right? My wife would have, who knows what she would have done. You're not spending that money on that. So, fortunately, I had my dad and his friend, and we started on it. We worked on it. We tweaked it, and it took I get the timing at least 2 years, but I don't remember if that was just on the production mold or if that was on everything. But it took a while, the spacing and to get it to where it stays on the hook and something that you could still work with to get the flotation in it. That was very satisfying when it happened, but it did take a long time. My dad made the molds and we thought it took a long time. He didn't know anything about making production molds. He knew oil-filled equipment machining, right?
Yeah.
So he and I figured this out, and I was like, man, both of us like, man, this took forever because he only did it on his spare time. Well, once like the Knockin Tails, I paid a professional company to do them for me, and it still took just as long. So my dad actually knocked it out of the park, and all that it cost me was the materials, not $12,000. But yeah, it was very satisfying when I did that. And, the marketing side of it is a whole nother story. That's the difficult part. Making the lure do what you want is a lot easier than conveying the message.
Or the engineering behind it, right? Like, because I mean, you could throw a lure that looks identical, but there might be a weight in the lure. There might be a different,
the density is all wrong,
and then it just totally acts different.
Right. Yeah. The durometer of the plastic is a big part of it as well. You have to have it, soft enough to get the action, not too soft where it's going to tear up, soft enough to where you can still get the foam in it on that one. With the Knockin Tail, right? That one took a while too to get the exact placement, the size and shape of the lure. That was, that one also took a couple years in the design phase, not even in the production, but just in the design phase, to get the right plastic, the right shape, the right rattle in the right position. There was a lot of frustration and a lot of trial and error on that. So, but it all paid off. We've done really well. March will be 2 years since we started selling the Knockin Tails. We're in 76 retailers right now in 10 states. So they've caught on.
Awesome. And just to kind of go back, I heard you say when you're talking about West Bay and using corkies, did you say that you used to buy them for $3 a pop?
They were $3 or $3.50. Yeah, I would buy them at Mr. Brown's house. Yep.
Jonathan's fronting. He actually goes to Academy when they have this sale, and he'll fill up a big old basket. Send me pictures of big old baskets. Man, I got them for like $2 each. I got them for $1 each. So,
and that's but when Mr. Brown, when I heard he was selling to Merriel, I went to his house and I think I bought 35. So
wow!
I have tons in my closet right over here. I haven't even taken out of the bag yet.
Yeah. I only buy them whenever I can get them on clearance because I can't justify $8. And of course, you do the custom ones are like $15 now.
Oh, yeah.
But man, I was just surprised to hear you got them for $3, and directly from Mr. Brown. That's even better.
Yeah.
So for those of you who are listening on podcast land, obviously you can watch us live at facebook.com/OneLastCastPodcast. We go live, and this is live right now. We're talking to Michael, the creator of Knockin Tail and Controlled Descent. So for those of you listening and are not really sure what we're talking about, how about, Michael, you talk about Controlled Descent as what is that? Describe it to our viewers who are listening to us who can't see it, and then after that we'll go to Knockin Tails. That way that you can describe that as well.
Okay, so the Controlled Descent lures, they have a hollow cavity in the back, and I have two styles. I have a 5-inch jerk bait, twitch bait, dart side to side, and I have a 4-inch paddle tail. The bodies are very, very similar, and it has a small hole in the nose, and each lure comes with the flotation that you can put in it if you want to use it. You just twist it and push it in, and with that, it'll float with a hook. Any other soft plastic, well, for the most part, there's a few now. You put a hook in, it's going to sink. So right there, it already has that added buoyancy to it. They're designed to fish on a weedless hook, not on a jig head. And if you have a hook where you can put the weight in the back like a mustad, it'll sink horizontally and it'll sink super slow. So the ideal use, in my opinion, and how I use them, is in really shallow water. Say knee deep, even waist deep. Anything more than that, then I'll switch over to a Knockin Tail. But they're a good lure to fish around structure. You're not going to get hung up on anything. It's good to fish in grass. If you're fishing something a different design and you let it fall down in the grass, normally when you pick it up, you're going to catch some grass on the tip. The way these are designed, that's not going to happen. So you can fish them slow. A lot of the areas I fish are knee deep with maybe 6 to 10 inches of water on top of the grass. So you don't have a lot of room there. Any other lures, you have to work them fast. Great if the fish are active. If they're not, you're just not going to catch them. But with the controlled descent, you can fish them anyway, fast and slow. And they'll just hang there in front of the fish.
Yeah, you can stay in that strike zone, or you can stay in that water column that you want to be in without working it, zooming it right past them, especially if they're not active biting. Now, when you say knee deep and waist deep, for some people, like I have a friend named Nicholas Gibson, his waist is probably up to your knee. So, you might want to give the feet in that one. So
let's say 2 feet, 2 feet or less.
Okay.
That's where I like to be.
Yeah.
Say 3 to 4 feet, I'll still use it. Anything over 4 feet, then it's a little deeper. Not saying you can't use them; it's a little deeper than I typically would, unless we're fishing under the lights. The fish it can be 10 feet, but the fish are in the top of the water column. That works really well too.
Yeah, that's definitely a shots fired moment. But calling out Nicholas like that.
Yeah.
But,
I don't see
but
anywhere though.
He'll probably come on here shortly. He always does.
Yeah. So actually, with the controlled descent, my best trip I actually had on was in West Bay, and towards the end of August, October timeframe, you have a really big grass die off in West Bay. It's when the cold fronts start coming through, and it's very difficult to fish in that area because of all that grass floating on there. But if you can navigate the grass, you can catch really good fish, and especially they would be, as you say, about knee deep, very, very, very shallow. And I was having a problem, like they were just smashing topwaters, but I only got like a few twitches in before everything got fouled up with grass. And I had that a controlled descent in there, and basically it just kind of glided on top, and they were just popping that out of the water like it was a topwater.
Right.
But I was catching them because they weren't foul. It wasn't fouling on the grass. So it's definitely a very useful lure to have in your arsenal in these like heavy grass environments.
And you can use them as a topwater as well. So the jerk bait, I'll use it as a topwater. It'll walk the dog. You can keep it on the surface easily, and if you pause it, how a lot of times you get the blow up on the topwater. If you throw soft plastic in there, they'll eat it. Well, this one, if you get the blow up and they miss it, which they normally don't, you can just pause it and let it break the surface. And a lot of times that's all it takes to induce the strike.
Yeah,
that's with respect to the weight of the hook, right? With that,
right?
Putting these big old hooks on them, and
And I use them on a tandem rig for flounder too. So I like to tandem rig it. Keep the back one on an unweighted hook so it floats. So that way the back one is always, a foot to 6 inches off the bottom, depending how I'm marking it. So it looks more realistic. It just never hits the bottom.
Yep. And obviously nothing. I don't think anything is ever snag proof, but if you're fishing over oysters, I think you'd be comfortable using that because it's difficult to foul it and get caught on it.
Yeah. I've never lost one. I'm talking going back to 2014 when I started designing one. I have never lost one too.
That's amazing. And from the controlled descent, and you have the Knockin Tails, which you're talking about flounder. The Knockin Tails, I had my best flounder year this last year with using Knockin Tails. Just that extra rattle in the back, combined with Pro Gear, they would follow it and they wouldn't let go. So explain to our listeners about what the Knockin Tail lure is.
Yeah. To go into that, I've had a lot of customers tell me that that's all they use for flounder now. They said there's just something about it, and that they don't throw anything else. They switch from bolt to Knockin Tail. So, but the Knockin Tail is, and my lure names kind of describe what they do. Controlled descent, you can control the descent. Right? You can control the sink rate to whatever you want. Knockin Tail, the tail knocks. It rattles. There's a rattle built into the tail. So on a steady retrieve on the fall, it's going to rattle all the time, kind of like a subtle rattle trap. It's just always going to make noise if it's moving. You don't have to twitch it. If you had a rattle in the body, you have to twitch it. This one you can twitch it or you can steady reel it and it's still going to rattle. So it's a paddle tail. It's 4 inch. The one we have on the market now is 4 inches, 22 colors with the rattle built into it.
Awesome. So I'm going to ask you a question a little bit off topic. What's your best sellers right now? Just give me your top 5 bestseller colors you got right now. Not to say that, The other ones are no good. I'm pretty sure there's a place for them, but I'm just curious. Throwing 5 colors out there. I sell a lot of these 5 colors. I got to keep making these 5 colors. What are they?
Chicken on a chain is number 1. Texas roach and purple demon. Purple demon is kind of a maroonish plum with its chartreuse tail. Those are tied for number 2. Pearl lime is up there, and then the 5th it kind of varies. You've got those top standouts, and then it can kind of go between, white ice is up there. My heavy metal is up there. So those kind of fluctuate a little bit. But the top four,
so the flamingo, the pink color is not doing up there?
It is not. It's in the middle, right? So it's in the middle. When I only had 6 colors, it was up there. Once I expanded to 20, it kind of fell in the middle, and that's kind of where it stayed.
Merrill's really pushing for that pink flamingo color.
Yeah, man, that pink I like. Man, I threw that a pink and gold color. I think it was Bass Assassin that made it one time, and I was fishing the Lone Star kayak series, and they threw us a pack. It's like, hey, we're gonna start pushing this color, and I started throwing that color, man. And man, I went through a pack of lures like that. Stacy is with us. She joined us, and Stacy was actually throwing your lures out there when we had a meetup for the veterans. And she stuck a nice, my guess is like a 6-pound trout.
Oh, nice.
With your lure. Yeah. Good.
Yeah, I really like that heavy metal and the clear water, clear green water. Really love that color. And I see, Paul mentioned the salt and pepper on there. I don't throw that one in the top only because kind of the numbers in the history I look at is in aggregate of everything. And I just got that color, I think, in October. But I'm almost sold out of it. And I order a lot, so that color is up there. It doesn't fall into the top because I'm looking at it on a year and a half or 2 year running average.
Yeah, but salt and pepper is an old school color that like everybody has and everybody uses. So I'm sure that given enough time, it's going to go up there.
Yeah, in a year it'll be in the top 5 for sure.
Yeah.
If I don't sell out and if I can get some more, so otherwise I don't.
Yeah, remember those lures I bought at the show? I'm already out of those, man. We ran through them.
Oh, that went quick.
Yeah, I mean, we're on the water, every day, so.
Well, speak for yourself, Merriel, because I'm stuck as a weekend warrior.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Exactly. I haven't fished yet this year.
Right, no. Yeah, we need to change that. So.
I agree.
Yeah, so I think this is the perfect time since we're kind of talking about Knockin Tails. I think that you have you were telling us about an announcement that you want to make about some of your new products coming up, and I think this is a perfect time to go out. So. I think this is a first, and I'm excited to hear about it.
All right,
first
good.
here on
I'm ready to talk about it. This is some breaking news. We talked, a couple weeks ago, and I said, well, maybe we'll talk about this, maybe we won't. So it turned out we have 2 things to talk about. So I'm going to show it for those of you that are watching. You can see what one of the new lures looks like, and I'm also going to go over some of the features that are built into the lure that people may just take for granted or not really even pick up on it. So the first news is we have a 5-inch Knockin Tail that's coming out. It should be available on the website the first week of March, I hope. It has a louder, larger rattle in the tail. So there's added plus right there. And this is the actual color we'll have. We're going to have one in pearl. So here's the 5-inch. Let's see where I'm at here. So some of the things, one thing that's new on this one is it has a belly slot. So you can put scent in there.
Stuff it.
What's that?
Stuff it will procure.
Yeah, exactly. And then obviously it's always also there for the weedless rigging and a better hook set. So that we don't have on our other ones. These other things we have on all of our Knockin Tails. So it has a line on the top. There you can kind of see it right there. So that serves 2 purposes. It has that same line on the bottom. So if you rig it weedless, you can use that line on the bottom as a guide, right? So you're dead center. Same thing on the top, whether you're weedless or you're on a jig head, you can use it. You're right, rigging it true. And when you're weedless, it sits down in there a little bit, and you're not going to catch any of the floating grass or anything else.
Awesome.
The other thing is we have this dimple here in the chin. See it right there. Kind of see it that way. what that is for, and that's also on all of our lures. It's just more noticeable on this one because I had more real estate. I could put a bigger dimple in it and still get a lot of plastic here for the hooks to bite and to stay on. But that's for on your weighted hooks, so it can go up in there. So when you get a fish, it comes down and you get more hook to penetrate.
That's cool.
If otherwise, if you're staying away from it, you can't collapse. So that just gives it a place to go. But like I said, all of our lures have it. It's just more noticeable on this one. So that's some of the features on the Knockin Tails and on the 5-inch. The second thing is we also have a 3.25-inch that's coming out. This is all actual color that we're going to have. Also, we're calling it a glass minnow. And this one actually was supposed to be out first. It's still in production right now. I should have it in a couple weeks. Had some problems with the mold. Had to send it back a couple times. a lot of frustration. So actually, this one started first, but it's coming out last. So, but anyway, so that's the big news. We've got different sizes.
Does that one have a rattle in it too?
It does. Yeah. They all have rattles in the tail. And for those of you that can see, we've got the 4, which is the pearl one.
Oh man, that's gonna be good.
Yep.
That one, because it's gonna. So the paddle you have on that one, plus the size of the lure, plus the rattle, that little one's gonna be.
So this one, the small one from
right.
my fingers back, is the exact same as the 4-inch. It just has a smaller body, so you have less water.
Right.
Disrupting the tail, so it's going to have even more action.
Yes.
You get the smaller size. This one is going to be a killer in the spring, under the lights. Yeah. I mean, this glass minnow color is going to knock it out.
I was about to say
a little excited. Yeah, I got a little excited there. We're guys. We love lures, man.
That one should have been out last spring, right? So that's how excited I am about it. I'm a year late. So
So that 3.25 is, like you said, it's gonna be perfect for spring with the shad hatch. They want that smaller profile, and of course the rattle is going to even just make it attract the fish over there even better. And that 5-inch, like I would be using it now for the big trout. Fishing around 10, 12 feet, just hopping on those ledges. But I'm really excited about both of them.
So
I am not drilling Curtis, but
7 colors for each one. The 3.25 are all new colors. There's no duplicates. The 5-inch, the duplicates are chicken on a chain and pearl. The other 5 colors are going to be new colors to the lineup. The 5-inch, will only be available online for several months because I don't have bags for it. So once we launch those, hopefully the first week of March, maybe. They'll be online only probably until June, maybe May. But I can use the same bags I have for 3.25. So those will hopefully hit retailers sometime in March or April.
Awesome.
So what kind of stores?
I'll be at the fishing show. I'll be at the fishing show in March.
If I wanted to buy some of these lures at a local tackle shop, what's a good shop I could pick up some of these other than online, right? Of course.
Right.
But maybe.
So in this area, we are in Fishing Tackle Unlimited, all 3 locations. Anglers Anonymous in Katy, Serious Tackle in Lamarck, K6 Island Sports in Galveston, Line Cutters in West Columbia. That's the main ones right here, say in the Houston vicinity. Johnny's Sports Shop in Eagle Lake. It goes out further, but that's the real local one, so Houston.
Awesome.
I don't think I missed it.
Yeah, so you heard it here first. The 5-inch and the 3.25 coming out. One of them hopefully in March be ready to go, and of course at the Houston Fishing Show, which is I believe in March as well. Is that correct?
March 23rd it starts.
March 23rd. So if you want to get your hands on these lures, either keep looking on the website or head over to the fishing show. And of course, whenever we get the notification that he is ready to start distributing, we'll post it on our Facebook page at facebook.com/One Last Cast podcast. Awesome stuff. So I kind of wanted to change gears a little bit and kind of go through the lure making process. We kind of touched on it whenever you talked about your history, but for Merrill and I, besides Merrill watching that one video that makes him an expert,
It's
um,
true. This is true.
how do you go about getting into the process of making these plastics? Because I know for you, like you said, you had this idea, you stewed on it for a while, and eventually you just went and did it.
Right.
What is some of the stuff that you learned through this process, and maybe some of the mistakes that you made that you learned and it perfected your technique to make these lures?
Right. So it depends what you want to do. If you just want to make lures and maybe save a little money and just kind of have a hobby, you can buy things ready made. Right. So you can go on tons of websites. You can buy a mold, single cavity, pour from the top, multi cavities. You can inject them. So you can buy that stuff relatively inexpensive if you don't have your own idea. You can buy the plastic. You can save your old plastic and melt it. Just a Pyrex measuring cup in a microwave. That's how most people are going to do it.
What are we making here? Lures?
All plastic lures.
Oh, okay, all right.
So so some of the hazards, right? So the fumes are very hazardous. So if you're going to be doing it, you want a well ventilated area, exhaust fans or another fan. I recommend a respirator. Definitely wear gloves. You'll see a lot of guys on videos and they're up in the north and they're doing it in their basement and I don't hear any exhaust fans. I don't see anything and they're not wearing any type of protection on their hands or anything.
We're talking about lure skin, guys.
You get it on you once and your skin is gone in a second.
Oh wow.
You wipe the plastic off and your skin is gone. So don't ask me how I know. But and it's the one time, right? So I typically try to wear, and I don't always do this. Typically try to wear long sleeves, and it'd be like I'm just gonna go make a couple. I'm not gonna put all this stuff on it. There you go. It shoots on you.
For someone like me, I rather just pay and buy what I'm looking for, and I don't making them is sounds like it's a lot of trouble.
It can be really easy, right? So you get the top ones. You can just pour it in. I'll kind of go over a little bit. So I knew nothing about making lures when I started. I mean, absolutely nothing. So this is what I used first because I was doing injections, and this is a gun to vaccinate cattle. I bought it at Tractor Supply. So, like I said, my dad's a machinist, so we made a different top to it that fit into the mold we made. And then I could inject multiple at one time.
Oh, wow.
Those of you that aren't looking, I'm kind of showing some molds here and things like that. So this is my prototype. This is my home jerk shad mold right here.
For our podcast listeners, can you give a little bit of description of
So
we have quite a few.
Yeah, this is an aluminum mold that my dad made. And this is for a 5-inch controlled descent jerk shad. And it's an injection mold, so where I would fill up that syringe basically, and then shoot it in there, and I could shoot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lures at a time. So this is kind of what it looks like on the inside. So you would put your injector up here. Mm-hmm. It comes down through the cavities, goes both ways, and fills them up. Wow. This is also our this is a mini controlled descent jerk shad. I didn't release it, but talk about good under the lights. That was it just wasn't very durable because there's just not enough real estate to stay on the hook.
Yeah.
But talk about getting the action. It's really good. So not everybody's going to have access to this where someone can make it. If you want to pay someone to make the mold to your design, you're going to have to pay the designer, you're going to have to pay the metal, you're going to pay the machining. It's very expensive, $100 an hour, whatever for the machine.
Oh, wow.
So there's other ways you can go about it. So if you have your own design and you want to make your own lure, you can carve them out of wood, you can make them out of clay, and you can do different things. One of the easiest ones is you can buy Alumalite. It's called the Alumalite mold putty, and it's really soft. And what you would do is just put it in a container, pour some in there, let it cure, and then put your carved lure on top of it, and then pour more over it. And then you split it open, take it out, and now you have a mold. It's very cheap, very inexpensive. It's very good as you're going through the design of a lure, because most of the time they don't work. You just throw it away and make some changes. It didn't cost you much. And this one, you would just split it open, pour your molten plastic in there from your measuring cup, close it up, give it a few seconds, it hardens, and you take it out and you go try it. So that's a very inexpensive way to do it. My very first multi-cavity mold that I made was out of this other material. I think it's also by Alumalite, but it's hard. And this way I could inject multiple ones to kind of see how that would work. It's very crude, but it worked. The lures didn't look good, but they swam fine. And then that's when I went to the aluminum mold.
I see.
So, but like I said, you can design your own by carving them, or you can just buy them pre-made. Or if you had a lure, say, hey, there's this lure I used to use in 1990 and no one makes it anymore. I've got one left. You could use this Alumalite Putty and make a mold for it, and you could pour your own. Awesome. So if you're trying to get something that's not out there. But there's a lot to it. I did a lot of just melting old plastics. Just for the design, I didn't want to mess with the colors, putting the dye in it and all the other stuff. I just grab a pack like Jonathan does on the discount rack at Academy and pay $1.
Yeah.
I kind of busted his little deal there. They're probably gonna beat him to it this time.
Yeah.
Like, thanks a lot, Merriel.
I'm also broke, so there's that. So
Oh, okay. Maybe I'll go buy the rack.
Yeah. So what are kind of the common mistakes that you've experienced whenever you went through this process? Obviously, I know there is something to be said about trial and error, that you learn from your mistakes and you get it to where you want it to be. But for somebody who's starting out, who like they have that idea or they have the mold, what are some of the mistakes that you've learned so that you kind of pass on that knowledge?
You burn a lot of plastic. So heat your plastic in increments. Don't try to just do it too fast. Heat a little, mix it, let it sit, heat a little bit more, like 30 seconds at a time, maybe a minute to get started. You can use a hot plate. I've never done that. Some people use a hot plate. If you're making a production mold, you also have to vent the molds. So getting your venting right, and I don't know how many people are going to be doing this on this level. And if you can see it here, so anyway, there's a lot of holes in here. And there's very little, these little lines that join the holes. So actually, that's where the air comes out. But they're so small that when you push the plastic in, the air comes out, but the plastic doesn't. So you don't even see those on your lure because of the thickness of the plastic versus air. But getting the venting right, getting the temperature and pressure right. A lot of times you'll get dents in your lures, which will drive you crazy. Those are all things: time, temperature, pressure, and venting that can kind of eat your lunch. If you're buying a mold already made, hopefully they've already designed that into it. And that's only on injecting, right? If you're pouring it in, you're not going to have those issues.
Okay.
What do you prefer, injecting or pouring?
I like the injecting. The only poured ones I've done are on these soft molds that I showed you. So I like the injecting. I mean, you can do multicolors on the pour too, but it's going to be inconsistent. If you do the ones where you inject it, you can just do more. I don't know. It's I prefer injecting them.
Yeah,
that's kind of how I started with them.
Awesome. And of course, if you have any questions out who are listening or watching us live, go ahead and just post them in the comments, and we'll see if we can get to them. But let's actually, now that we've kind of have an understanding of what the Knockin Tail Lures are, your controlled descent, and as well as kind of the process that you took. I think Merriel and I kind of want to talk to you about shallow water fishing, because that's something that I think that you kind of made and that you've done, and we see your videos. You fish out of a kayak, a new canoe. and you're fishing these super clear waters, and we can see the redfish and trout just come from smashing your soft plastic. So kind of kind of where do you predominantly fish, and kind of give us some kind of tips and tactics and a general overview of how you normally fish.
Yeah, so normally we'll say the last few years it's mostly say Corpus to South Bay, down in South Texas, deep South Texas. I go there because I like the way it looks, right? It just feels different when I'm fishing down there. And my wife always like, why do you drive so far? And then I took her there one time and she's like, oh wow, this is nice, right? She didn't know that existed. Number one, I like the feel of it, right? Number two, I feel that's where the big trout live. Yes, they're in East Matagorda Bay used to be good. I don't know how it is with the freeze. But I like to target big trout. So you have to go where they live if you want to catch them. Like that's that simple. And South Texas is known for that. The tactics, a lot of the stuff is the same, right? Bait, water movement, whatever that is, wind or tide driven. And one thing that I like to look for that maybe a lot of people I don't really hear a lot talking about it, is when you're fishing grass. So you have grass and you have the potholes. A lot of time you have different types of grass. And I find that is also a type of structure, right? Mm-hmm. I usually catch a lot of fish where you'll have a different type of grass growing next to another one. So it's a different color, it's a different type, it's a different thickness, it's everything. And that is, in a sense, it's just like if there's a reef right there or a rock or anything else. So that's kind of one little tip. Just kind of look for where the grass is different. And then everything else I look at is, water depth, time of year, proximity to deeper water, even though I'm fishing shallow. A lot of those areas, like the last time I went down to South Texas, I wanted to fish shallow. So that's where I went. I spooked a really big trout that was probably in the 4 to 5 foot range, but I didn't want to fish there because I wanted to fish shallow. I tried to catch that fish, right? It never came back around. But deeper water, closer to the shallow water. When you're fishing in the wintertime, early spring, those type of things. Mud bottom, a lot of those areas where I fish, sometimes in the videos, you'll see it looks muddy, but if you look 10 yards away, it's crystal clear. That mud's just from me getting taken in a circle by that fish. So, those are the same, just the same scenarios.
So what kind of grass do you like? Like what is predominantly the grass? Is it shell grass, turtle grass? What kind of grass are y'all down there in Corpus?
Kind of what you saw in Baffin.
Cool.
It's usually pretty much the same all the way down south.
Right.
It's usually the same grass. You
don't know the name?
Yeah, I don't know the name of it. And it'll have different patches of a thicker, darker brown grass.
Right.
That's also down there.
Okay, so you're not targeting a specific grass. You're targeting grass that's different from other grass.
If I'm in an area, right? So if I'm in an area, yeah. So when I find those areas, obviously I mark them and I go back to them and I fish those again and again. But if I'm drifting an area or wading an area and I see the two different types and I haven't been in that area before, I'm going to fish that just like it's its own type of structure. And whatever it is about it, fish attract.
So if I was a fish, right, and I'm in the grass, am I in the? Some people like to fish the pockets, right, where there's no grass, and there's like grass around it, and they'll try to drop their bait in that. Can you explain on the positioning of a trout if I was either guarding something or if I was hungry or if I was hunting? What would that look like in your experience as a prey and a predator in that experience?
So if I'm fishing the area, I'll look for.
So we'll get into details, guys.
Yeah, look for what's different. If I'm in an area that's solid grass, I'll fish it, but I don't prefer it, right? Because there's nothing for me to distinguish my casting, right? It's just all the same. Just like if it was a big sand flat, it's all the same. So I like to find areas that have a good mixture of the potholes with the grass. And then the fish, typically they're on the edge. They're on the edge of it. Sometimes I'll try to cast across it and bring it in. And sometimes I want to see the strike. I'll let it pause in the middle of that hole so I can see it. And sometimes they'll come out and get it. And sometimes they won't. They'll wait until you pull it right up to that grass edge and then they'll hit it. So it depends on the fish's mood how aggressive they are. I think if they're lone fish, they wait for it. If there's more than one, then they have that competition and they're going to go after it. So that's when they might come out in the middle and eat it.
So yeah, West Bay. A lot of people don't know that where the grass ends and begins, but if you can figure out where the grass ends and those pocket holes, like Michael's explaining, that might be a good place to start targeting some fish.
Right.
Just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
Always on the edges, and they have different size holes. Sometimes they're on the smaller holes, smaller sand pockets.
Yeah, and just to add to that, and I think we discussed this a little bit before in our previous episodes, but yeah, those changes are really, really important, especially if everything is the same. If you're on a big grass flat or a big sand flat and it's all sand or it's all grass, you're looking for that one little change. And it could be the change in the grass like you were talking about. It could be where you have a very slight drop off where it's still grass, but the depth goes from like 1.5 foot to 1.8. That 0.3 foot change, they know where that is and they may be hanging around there. But,
I know where that's at, Jonathan. No,
and that's why I like wade fishing. So I use the kayak as a boat most of the time to get to a spot, and I get out and wade a lot. And anytime I get to a spot like that, number one, I determine did I just step in a hole, or is it an edge? And if it's an edge, I'm going to stay there and I'm going to work that all the way around. Whether I know how far it goes or I don't, if I know it's not a hole, then I'm going to fish that transition.
So like the predator fish are using that as a camouflage to ambush bait.
Right.
So we got some questions.
You'll get when you're in that really shallow water. The first time I really started fishing shallow water, it just never dawned on me until I saw it. But I was in Baffin, water was really clear, and I caught a fish, and there's a school of trout following it, and that happened multiple times. So I said, well, if it's happening in the clear water, it's happening in Galveston where I can't see it too. So, back then, if my buddy had a fish on, I'd cast at his fish and I'd catch one. Right. So they're typically going to be in schools.
Right.
So whether you can see it or not, they're all trying to get that lure out of the other fish's mouth. I've seen that hundreds of times.
Those bigger schools, fishing with Jonathan one time, and he hooked up and he's like, "Oh, they're right here." He done spooked the whole school of 3 of them. So I couldn't hook up after he did. I'm just teasing him. I'm teasing him.
I was just letting you know where they are. We have a question. It's actually not really related to really any of our topics we've been talking about. However, since we're all 3 of us here are big trout guys, the question is from Ricardo. Do you think the new size and limit regulations will help to get bigger fish in the near future?
Oh man, here we go.
Here we go.
No,
here we go.
Yeah, this is a good question for Michael, and I'd like to hear your opinion on this.
I think yes, of course it will. Right, you take less, you get more.
Yeah.
So
it
is. I think it's cut and dry. You can argue the fact of was the slot limit the right numbers? They put the data out. The data is what it is, and you pick one. But yes, you take less, you'll get more. Simple. You take too much, you get less.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate for from the standpoint of the fishermen, because obviously I know people like to catch and keep their fish. But I think during our pre-production meeting, we were talking about Lake Calcasieu and how
I was going through my head. I didn't know if I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah.
But I think it's very interesting because Lake Calcasieu, from my experience, I've never fished there before, but it's taken on like a mythic proportions for me, because all I hear is how good it is. But from your experience, it is.
Mine are Michael's. Well, I watched YouTube on Calcasieu, so the experience factor is there.
Yeah, no, yeah. So,
YouTube on Calcasieu?
Yeah, just YouTube Calcasieu Lake, and then it'll show you. Become an expert in no time.
But from your experience, Michael, and what we were talking about is that it is on a massive decline. And of course, there could be a number of reasons because of why, but it also could be because of all the limits that they have there.
The lack of
access.
Right. And So all the data can tell you whatever it wants, but I'm the person that I'll look at that, but I'll base it on my experience, right? So the fishing over there is not what it was when I first started fishing there, and when I first started fishing there, it wasn't what I read about before I ever was able to make it there. So it had already started to go down. Touchy subject here, but I find that bays that have big lodges on them with multi dozens of guide boats that go out of them. I've seen those bays take huge hits over the last, say, 20 years. You know, you'll see it over time. So that tells me, you know, that yes, you can impact it by rod and reel. Right? Now I'm not going to mention any bays, but the ones that have a lot of big lodges on them, they're go back and look at history. They're not.
That's a good point. So do you obviously you think, you know, catch and release is probably the new regulations a good regulation for the lower, you know, these specific basin systems that they targeted, because I think we're out of that specific area. You think this is going to be?
I think it's a good thing, right? You know, so if you want to ask me, is it a good thing? Yes, right. I think it will help the numbers. I'm also have this other side of me that when they, you know, and they say it's coming back, but when you take away, it just you just keep taking and you keep taking and keep taking.
Yeah,
so
that's one of my
I've got
things.
a right hand and left-handed thought on that. Do I want to see bigger trout? Do I think it will help? Yes. Do I want it to be so restrictive that at some point we're never going to be able to fish again, or you're only going to be able to kayak and you can't kayak certain areas because you might scare the bird?
Right.
You know, you're not going to tear up the grass because you don't have your motor anymore, but now you're going to scare the birds, so now you can't fish there. It just goes on and on and on.
Another control button, right?
Exactly.
You know,
I have that side of it.
So some of these regulations make me think, because of the whole snapper regulation, I believe, and probably a high percentage of fishermen believe, that it's a joke. You know, the whole regulations on being tight on certain species is a joke, you know. So it's kind of like there's a whole bunch of things that people are confused about, like in comparing apples to orange or apples to apples. Right. Like these regulations and these numbers that they're getting, I'm glad they posted up some numbers to give people more of a visual on which base systems were doing good and which ones weren't doing good. So that was kudos on Texas Park and Wildlife. But yeah, definitely I don't want it to be where it's so heavily regulated that it's, you know, you know, people just don't want to fish anymore. And I think fishing is growing. It's not slowing down.
Oh, definitely.
I've heard several people say, "Oh yeah, it goes up and comes down. It has its ups and downs." And I remember that, you know, some of these older people, but I haven't really seen a slowdown in it, man. I'm seeing more boaters, more kayakers, more, you know, it just seems like it's growing.
Especially more kayakers.
Yeah. You know, so where I used to fish at, there was only maybe two other guys. And I used to see the guy in the box, but he doesn't count. He's everywhere. But it used to be a guy named Victor Cisneros, and Jay Lee, if he's on here, was the only guy. And I used to always see him drift. I probably won't bust his spot out, but I always see him drift this one area.
You already mentioned the box, man, so everybody knows what you're talking about. Seawolf Park.
You Seawolf Park, baby. That's it. But yeah, so it wasn't really that many. I remember boats pulling up to me and be like, "Man, you're gonna die in that thing." And then I'll be, "Man, what's the bad news?" Because it's like a little boat and there's a big old boat. But anyways,
yeah,
that's it.
Yeah. So no, these regulations, obviously they're a touchy subject, and there are merits and also downsides to it. But you know, at this point, the only thing that you can really do is just, if you're very passionate about it, make your voice heard.
You're gonna change the rules anyways, but you know.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't want to be that down about it, but Michael, I wanted to thank you for coming on here and telling us about yourself and your lures, and of course the exciting news about your new Knockin Tails, the 5-inch and also the 3.25 coming out. So if you wanted to order, and of course if you wanted to order, you can use our code, the OLCP 2022 for 20% off your Knockin Tail Lures. If they want to order, where can they go?
So mycoastoutdoors.com.
Awesome.
And my guess is, pulling up a calendar here, my guess is they will be available on the website the week of March 7th, somewhere in there. So that'll be my best guess.
You're planning to have them for the fishing show.
Yeah.
I'll be at the fishing show, I think.
For sure.
Yeah. I'll be at the fishing show that Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I'm going to try to be there 3 days because I missed some people on Friday and I missed some people on Sunday, and I was only there on Saturday, but I'll try to be there 3 days at the FTU booth. So y'all swing by and say hi and let's talk fishing. And swing by Michael's booth and pick up some lures.
Yeah, we have a bigger booth this year. We have a 10x20. We have a new banner that we're going to have at the show. All the new products. Hopefully some things I haven't mentioned today that we'll have at the show that are new as well. And we'll be on Big Water Adventures on Louisiana episode this time on March 8th, I think.
Awesome. Awesome.
Outdoor channel.
Perfect. So, Michael, thanks once again. And of course, all of y'all, you've been listening to the One Last Cast podcast. If you want to join us live, we go live every other Wednesday, or we try to. And you can watch us live at facebook.com/One Last Cast podcast. Or just download us on your favorite podcasting platform. I guess, thanks everybody. Thanks to all the listeners for listening in and tuning in. And, y'all guys have a good one.
Thank you guys for joining. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.